The clinking of wine glasses felt like a countdown. My whole family was packed into a corner booth at Trattoria Milano, a place with prices that made my stomach clench. It was a celebration for my sister Sierra. Of course it was. It was always for Sierra. She sat across from me, glowing, occasionally stroking the side of a brand new Chanel handbag that sat on the table like a guest of honor. That bag cost more than my bakery's monthly rent. I knew because I had just paid it. My phone buzzed against the tablecloth. A single sharp vibration. I glanced down. An email. The subject line screamed in all caps, "Lease renewal, urgent." A cold dread washed over me. I silenced the phone and flipped its screen down, just as my mother stood up, lifting her glass. "A toast," she announced, her voice ringing with pride. The whole table fell silent, beaming at her. To my brilliant Sierra, on her incredible new promotion. She always knew what she wanted, and she went for it. Her eyes, sharp and critical, slid over to me. Her smile tightened into something that wasn't a smile at all. "It just goes to show you what real ambition can do," she continued, her words a clear, targeted missile. "Not everyone is cut out for it." The table was quiet. They all knew who she was talking about. My bakery, the business I had bled for, was nothing more than a cute little hobby in their eyes. Sierra's climb up some corporate ladder was success. My 18-hour days were a pastime. I bit the inside of my cheek and stared at my water glass. I just had to get through this. But Sierra, never one to miss an opportunity, leaned forward with a pitying look. "It's okay, Chloe. Someone has to make the cupcakes for the real parties." A few cousins tittered nervously. My mother, however, let out a sharp, ugly laugh. She loved it. She leaned across the table, and though her voice was a whisper, it was loud enough for everyone to hear. It was meant for them to hear. "You're just jealous," she spat, her eyes glinting in the candlelight, because Sierra made something of herself. And just like that, something inside me snapped. A dam I had spent a decade building just broke. The years of swallowing my pride, of late-night money transfers, of being the family. Silent, reliable, invisible safety net. It all came roaring to the surface. I looked up from my plate. My voice was low, but it cut through the noise like shattering glass. "Then have her return the $61,000 I poured into this family since college." Silence. It wasn't just quiet. It was a vacuum. Sound itself seemed to die. My aunt's fork clattered against her plate, the noise echoing in the sudden void. My mother's face, which had been flushed with triumph, turned the color of chalk. Sierra's jaw was literally hanging open, but my eyes were on my dad. He had a forkful of lasagna halfway to his mouth. He was completely, utterly frozen. His eyes, wide and unblinking, were locked on mine. He didn't even seem to be breathing. Slowly, as if moving through water, he lowered his fork to his plate. His voice was a dry, cracking rasp. What, $61,000? The drive home from the restaurant was a blur. My dad's question, "What's $61,000?" hung in the air of the car, completely unanswered. My mother had grabbed her purse, hustled everyone out, and shot me a look of pure fury before slamming her car door. No one had said a word to me. I unlocked the door to my bakery. The familiar scent of yeast and sugar usually felt like a warm hug, but tonight, it couldn't touch the bitterness in my throat. I leaned against the cool stainless steel counter, and the memories came flooding in. The $61,000 wasn't one thing. It was a death by 1,000 paper cuts. My mind flashed back to a night 18 months ago. It was 2 a.m., and my hands were deep in a batch of brioche dough. My phone had rung, and my mother's panicked voice crackled through the speaker. Dad's company had restructured. He was gone. They were about to lose the house. I didn't even wash the flour off my hands. I just pulled up my banking app, its cold blue light illuminating my exhausted face, and transferred $15,000 from my business savings. "We'll pay you back every single cent, sweetie," Mom had sobbed into the phone. "I promise." A promise she never mentioned again. Then there was Sierra's genius idea 4 years ago, a drop-shipping scarf boutique. She'd emailed me a 2-page business plan full of typos and broken links. But my parents pushed. They begged. "It's an investment in your sister's future, Chloe. An investment that cost me $20,000 of the money I was saving for a new oven." Her boutique folded in 6 months. The car repairs, the emergency dental bills, her credit card debts. I was the family's secret, silent emergency fund, the one they called when they were sinking. I slumped onto a stool, my head in my hands. The real reason I'd finally snapped wasn't just the insult. It was the letter I'd gotten that morning. The crisp, formal letter that was now sitting on my counter. I picked it up, my fingers trembling slightly. My landlord, a kind man named Mr. Chen, had sold the building. The new corporate owners didn't care about my little bakery. Their official notice was brutally clear. My rent was doubling. Effective in 30 days. 30 days to either come up with an impossible amount of money or lose everything. All the sacrifices, all the 18-hour days, would be for nothing. I couldn't save them anymore. I couldn't even save myself. My phone buzzed, vibrating hard against the steel counter. It was a text from my mother. "We need to talk. Your father is very upset. You embarrassed us all." The bell on my bakery door chimed. It wasn't the cheerful jingle of a customer. It was an angry, jarring clang. My mother and Sierra stood framed in the doorway, their expressions thunderous. They didn't come for pastries. They came for a surrender. My mother marched to the counter, her purse hitting the glass with a sharp thud. Sierra hovered behind her, arms crossed, a smug, indignant look on her face. "I don't know what kind of stunt you were trying to pull last night, Chloe," my mother began, her voice low and dangerous. "But you will call your father, and you will apologize." I wiped my flour-dusted hands on my apron, my heart hammering against my ribs. The old instinct was to shrink, to make myself small, to murmur an apology just to make it all stop. But I was so tired of stopping. "I have nothing to apologize for," I said. The words felt strange and powerful in my mouth. My mother's eyes widened in disbelief. That money was a gift. Families are supposed to help each other. You are being so incredibly ungrateful, trying to hold it over our heads now that your sister is finally succeeding. Ungrateful. There it was. The family's favorite brand. The word they stamped on me whenever I dared to have a need of my own. For years, that word had been a cage. Not today. It wasn't a gift, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. They were loans, and you promised I would be paid back. I kept records. Sierra let out a sharp, derisive laugh. Records? Oh please. You're actually delusional. Who even does that? I didn't answer her. Instead, I reached under the counter, my fingers finding the familiar, worn spine of a small book. I placed it on the counter between us. It was a simple, leather-bound ledger, its edges soft from years of use. It wasn't just for the business. It was for everything. I flipped it open to a page filled with my neat, precise handwriting. Dates, amounts, reasons. My mother physically recoiled, refusing to even look at it. She looked at the book as if it were a snake. "I'm not looking at your pathetic little notebook." Just then, the bell on the door chimed again, softly this time. It was my landlord, Mr. Chen, holding his usual empty coffee cup. He stopped just inside the door, sensing the poisonous atmosphere immediately. He saw my mother's furious face, Sierra's sneer, and my own rigid posture behind the counter. He heard my mother's next words, dripping with contempt. "You and this ridiculous fantasy are tearing this family apart." Mr. Chen quietly walked to the coffee machine and filled his cup, his eyes meeting mine for just a second. It wasn't a look of pity. It was a look of validation, of respect. As he turned to leave, he paused at the door. "Chloe," he said, his voice gentle but firm enough for my mother to hear, "let me know if you need anything." "About the lease. We can talk." My mother's head snapped towards him, but he was already gone. She turned back to me, her face a mask of rage. She had lost control, and she knew it. Fine, she hissed, grabbing her purse. Be that way. But you won't like it when the whole family finds out how you're trying to blackmail us. She spun around and stormed out, Sierra right on her heels. The bell chimed her exit, leaving me in a sudden, ringing silence, her threat hanging in the air like poison. My mother's threat didn't take long to become a promise. The attack came that evening. It wasn't a phone call. It was worse. A notification lit up my phone. It was a Facebook post. My mother had uploaded a professionally taken photo of her and Sierra, both smiling like angels. The caption was a masterclass in public execution, wrapped in a blanket of fake love. So incredibly proud of my wonderful daughter Sierra, who is building her empire from the ground up with nothing but hard work and integrity. It's such a shame when others, even family, get jealous of success. But we will always choose love and forgiveness. #family first, twant proud mom. My blood ran cold. Within an hour, the comments were a tidal wave of support for her. You're such a good mother. So classy. Haters are just your motivators, Sierra. Then came the private messages. The texts from aunts, uncles, cousins who hadn't spoken to me in years. Your mother is heartbroken. How could you? You need to stop this, Chloe. You're tearing the family apart over money. I'm so disappointed in you. They believed her. Of course, they did. She had spent my entire life building her narrative, curating her image as the perfect self-sacrificing matriarch. I was the quiet, difficult one with the messy flower hobby. Sierra was the star. The roles had been cast long ago. I sat on a stool in the middle of my dark bakery, the only light coming from the poisonous glow of my phone screen. On the counter beside me, the stark white of the lease termination notice seemed to mock me. I felt utterly, completely alone. A voice in my head, the one that sounded like my mother, whispered that they were right. I should have stayed quiet. I should have kept my head down and my wallet open. I almost picked up the phone to apologize. To beg. To crawl back into my box and make the pain stop. But then I looked up from the screen. My eyes adjusted to the darkness, and I saw the shapes of my life's work around me. The industrial oven I'd saved for 2 years to buy. The display cases I'd painstakingly restored. My gaze landed on the corkboard by the door. It was covered in photos of smiling customers holding their birthday cakes, thank you notes, written in crayon from kids. This was real. I had built this. Not with handouts, not with lies, but with 18-hour days and burned hands and an aching back. A new feeling washed over me. A cold, hard clarity that extinguished the despair. It wasn't anger. It was resolve. This wasn't about the $61,000 anymore. It was about respect. For myself. For my work. For the truth. My mother had chosen her battlefield. She just didn't realize I was done fighting by her rules. I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over my mother's contact, then scrolled right past it. I dialed another number. Mr. Chen? It's Chloe. I'd like to talk about that lease. And I might need a character witness. After the phone call with Mr. Chen, something inside me settled. The panic was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a strategist. The next week was a blur of quiet, methodical work. I lived a double life. By day, I was a baker, smiling at customers, piping frosting onto cupcakes, the picture of normalcy. But by night, I became an archaeologist, digging through the digital ruins of my own generosity. I spent hours at a 24-hour print shop, the steady hum of the machines the only sound in the sterile fluorescent-lit room. I printed 7 years of bank statements. With a bright yellow highlighter, I marked every single transfer made to my parents or Sierra. The yellow lines formed a roadmap of their dependents, a neon-bright testament to my silence. $500 emergency car repair. $2,000 Sierra's security deposit. $15,000 mortgage. But statements weren't enough. I dove into old email accounts, my fingers flying across the keyboard. And I found it. An email from my mother, sent the day after I'd saved their house. Her words practically jumped off the screen. "You saved us, sweetie. I swear we will pay you back as soon as your dad is back on his feet." I printed it in triplicate. I scrolled through years of text messages with Sierra, my thumb aching. And there it was, a poisonously cheerful text from 4 years ago, right after I'd sent her the money for her failed boutique. "OMG, thank you, Chloe. Consider it a short-term business loan. I'll pay you back with interest once I'm a millionaire." I screenshotted the entire conversation and printed it. I compiled everything into a thick, plain manila folder. With each added page, it grew heavier. It wasn't just paper. It was the weight of my voice. The next day, I met Mr. Chen at a small cafe. I laid out my fears about the lease, the corporate buyout, the impossible rent hike. He listened patiently, his hands wrapped around a cup of tea. "The new owners are difficult," he admitted. "But I have been in this neighborhood for 40 years. My word has some weight." He told me he'd already written a letter to the board on my behalf, citing me as a model tenant and a valued community business. "I will also attest to the character of your family should you need it," he added, his eyes telling me he knew exactly what that meant. He was in my corner. For the first time, I wasn't fighting alone. When I got back to the bakery, an envelope was sticking out of the mail slot. It was thick and covered in glitter that got all over my hands. An invitation. "You're invited to the official launch party and investor showcase for Sierra Chic. Come celebrate the next big thing in fashion." It was being held at a rented-out art gallery downtown, a public stage, filled with her potential investors. The perfect audience. I sat at my counter, the gaudy invitation in one hand, the heavy manila folder in the other. They had set the stage. Now, I would write the final scene. I opened my laptop, went to the RSVP link, and typed my name. Then I clicked, attending. The art gallery was all white walls and cold, polished concrete floors. Waiters in black uniforms drifted through the crowd with trays of champagne. My parents were playing their roles perfectly, smiling and shaking hands with men in sharp suits, Sierra's potential investors. And in the center of it all, my sister was holding court, glowing. Under the track lighting, the star of her own fabricated universe. I stood near the back, the heavy manila folder clutched in my hand, feeling like a ghost at a party. Sierra stepped up to a small podium, tapping a microphone. "Hi everyone. Thank you all so much for coming." She gave a breathless, 10-minute speech about her journey, her vision, and her unbreakable entrepreneurial spirit. She thanked her incredibly supportive family, especially her mother, for believing in me when no one else did. Her eyes flickered past me, standing in the shadows, as if I were a piece of the catering staff. When she finished to a round of polite applause, she beamed. "I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have." I raised my hand. A hush fell over the room. Every head turned. My mother shot me a look that could kill. Sierra's smile froze on her face. "Yes. Chloe?" I took a step forward, my voice even and clear, carrying easily in the suddenly silent room. "Congratulations, Sierra. You mentioned building your business from the ground up. I just have a question about your initial seed funding." Sierra stiffened. The color drained from her face. "It was from, private family investors." "I see," I said, taking another step. "Was that the $20,000 I transferred to your account on May 12, 2020? The one you referred to in this text message as a short-term business loan?" I held up the single printed screenshot. A few investors near the front exchanged glances. Murmurs started to ripple through the crowd. My mother surged forward, her face a mask of fury. "How dare you? This is a private family matter. You are just being selfish." There it was. That word again. Selfish. I turned to her, my voice dropping but losing none of its edge. "Was I being selfish when I paid your mortgage for 6 months after Dad was laid off? A sum of $15,800, which you promised in this email to repay?" I held up the printed email. Across the room, I saw my father flinch. He looked like he'd been struck. He never knew the full amount. He only knew by some miracle that they hadn't lost the house. This was the avalanche. I walked to an empty white table near the front and opened the manila folder. I didn't shout. I didn't raise my voice. I simply began laying the documents down, one by one, like a dealer laying out a hand of cards. Or the $5,000 for Dad's emergency dental surgery? I said, placing a receipt on the table. The $8,000 for the new transmission in the family car? I laid down another, the $12,200 to pay off your credit card debt, Sierra, so you could qualify for the lease on your apartment? Statement. Email. Text message. Receipt. I created a paper trail of their lies right there on the pristine white table, under the harsh gallery lights. I looked up and met my sister's terrified eyes. The total, I said, my voice ringing in the dead, suffocating silence, is $61,427.55. I wasn't jealous of your success, Sierra. I was financing it. No one moved. No one breathed. The investors weren't looking at Sierra's business plan anymore. They were looking at her character and seeing a massive debt. In the crushing silence, my phone vibrated in my hand. An email notification lit up the screen. The sender was Mr. Chen. The subject, good news. I opened it. Chloe, the board met this afternoon. They've approved a 5-year legacy tenant lease for you. Your rent is stabilized. Congratulations. A single tear I didn't know I was holding back slid down my cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of pure, unburdened relief. I looked up, past my sister's horrified face, past my mother's utter rage, and I met my father's shocked, heartbroken gaze. I never wanted any of this, I said quietly. My words meant only for him. I just wanted some respect. Then I turned, left the folder and all its ghosts on the table, and walked out of the gallery. I didn't look back once. 3 weeks later, the morning sun streamed into my bakery. The air was warm and smelled of cinnamon and fresh coffee. A new hand-painted sign was taped to the front window. Now hiring, assistant baker. Business was booming. My new 5-year lease was signed and framed in the back office. And for the first time in a decade, I felt light. I felt like I could breathe. My phone rang, buzzing on the counter beside a tray of cooling croissants. The screen read, Mom. I looked at it for a moment, my heart perfectly steady. The old panic, the old sickening sense of obligation, was just gone. I pressed the silence button and put the phone face down. I'd heard what happened, of course. A cousin had called, whispering a quiet, hesitant apology. Sierra's investor showcase had been a complete catastrophe. Every single potential investor had pulled out after I left. Her dream, built on my money and my silence, had evaporated into thin air. My mother's Facebook page had gone dormant. There was no victory in it for me, only a quiet, sad sense of inevitability. They had built their world on a foundation of lies, and it had finally, inevitably, collapsed. The bell on the door chimed, a cheerful, welcome sound this time. Mr. Chen walked in, holding the hand of his young granddaughter. Her eyes were as wide as saucers, taking in all the trays of pastries and cookies. Chloe, he said with a warm, genuine smile. This is Maya. She wants to know how to make the magic happen. I smiled back, a real smile that reached my eyes. I untied my apron and handed a smaller, clean one to Maya. Well, I said, dusting a bit of flour onto the counter for her small hands. The first secret is, you have to build on something strong. As I showed her how to knead the dough, watching her laugh as she got flour on her nose, I realized I finally had. The hardest decisions are the ones that force us to value ourselves. Sometimes, the only way to build a future is to stop paying for the past. If you've ever had to draw a line in the sand to protect your own peace, I'd be honored to hear your story in the comments below. And please don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about finding your strength.